Hi, I'm Graham from Second Era of Moles, and if you've clicked on this video accidentally, 90 seconds is all I ever ask. Welcome back to another week that was. This is the second week for Kanto's Champion Stadium. There's been a fair amount to keep us occupied this week. We've had the Legendary Arena with Azelf, we've had the Champion Stadium as always, we've had a few Legendary events to sink our teeth into, so let's get into the Champion Stadium first of all. So this week I wanted to take a bit of time to talk about how I choose the conditions for each round. Usually I will always have the move gauge -2 on there, that's a good 300 points. If I know that I've got a strong sync nuker or someone with a very strong move that can either hit all opponents at once or do a huge amount of damage to one of the opponents, I'll go with a strength strategy. So if you put Strength 6 on there, that's 600 points right away. If you put Strength 3 on there, that's another 300. If I'm not using status conditions, I'm going to put that on there. It depends on how I'm planning to approach the round. So if I know that I've not got a healer in my team, I'm going to put ally healing down 50% on there. If I know I'm not majorly using stats reductions, I'll put that on there. And it's sort of picking the ones that are going to give you easy points. So if you're not using stats reductions, you add that on there, that's an easy 100 points that isn't giving you any disadvantage anyway. So if you were going to use a strength based list of conditions, if you put no status on there, you can use strength 1 and that rather than strength 2, and that makes the enemy slightly easier to defeat. If I'm going for some kind of stall, I'll make sure that I've got all of the health parameters on there, all of the defense parameters on there. Usually I'll put crit hit protection on there as well, and both of the attack reductions, the top two for 50 points each. And I definitely think choosing your parameters is a real skill for the Champion Stadium, and knowing how it's going to work with the team that you're using. There are quite a lot of times where I've gone into a fight and I've been like, right, this is what I'm doing, and I've forgotten that I've either left no status conditions on, or I've put in no stats reductions and I'm relying on Mew or someone to lower the stats as much as possible. Anyway, enough gassing, on to round 1. So in round 1 you get a special attack boost. I chose to go against Bruno in this one because Bruno was weak to flying types this week. This meant that I was going to use Pidgeot as my main striker. Usually when I use Pidgeot, I also take along Elessa and Rotom because her breathtaking, in addition to reducing the sync countdown, it gives an accuracy boost, and my Pidgeot is gridded so that the higher its accuracy, the more damage moves do. I also took in Leaf and Eevee as my third pair this week. I wasn't quite sure who I was going to use for this one, but I thought Eevee's going to do a bit of healing. She's got a move that boosts the move gauge as well, and I thought that would work quite well. In terms of the parameters that I chose, I went with mostly strengths because I knew that I was going for kind of a sync nuke, heavy hitting kind of approach to this one. I wasn't expecting it to be a long battle. I knew that no status conditions, so that's in there. I wasn't trying to reduce stats, so that's probably in there as well. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. They'll be appearing over here. I think, yeah, this side is where I usually put them. And it's a standard approach for Blue and Pidgeot here. You use Smell You Later to boost that accuracy. You use Rotom to boost special attack. Eevee can either do Tackle or Iron Tail. Iron Tail might make them flinch, or it can use Let's Go to maybe boost the move gauge, although early in the battle that's not going to be too much of an issue because no one else is using it. Then you hit them with the big sync move because I've got Blue at 6x, it hits all of them, and then you're Hurricaning with Blue, you're using Rotom for breathtaking, you're hoping maybe you get a refresh or two on that one. You're using Eevee to do a bit of tanking and maybe a bit of healing if she needs it. So there's nothing too fancy about that one. The only thing that might cause you a bit of damage is if Machamp comes in there and he's got a big close combat and he also gets a crit on it, that can potentially one-shot your Eevee. it could do quite a bit of damage to Rotom 2 if it gets that far. So you might find that happens a couple of times in a row and you're down to just Pidgeot and you can't necessarily get to that sync move. So you could try putting Vigilance as Eevee's lucky skill to prevent that, and that should guarantee that you're going to get through this one. For round 2 this week, you get a physical attack reduction. I wasn't quite sure who I was going to use this one for this week when I was planning, so I decided to take on Agatha. I looked at the other conditions and I thought there's not really anything there that's going to do me any favours, and I ended up doing this one with a team of Karen and Houndoom, Grimsley, Grizzly would be a better name for him, Grimsley and Lipard, and Misty and Starmie. I went with mostly strength-based parameters again, but part of my strategy was to use Snarl to reduce special attack and also take advantage of Grimsley and his Snatch, so I definitely didn't want no stats reductions in there. So I started off with a team of Lunatone, Lipards and Houndoom in the middle. I thought that Lunatone's special defense boosts would be quite good for this one. It didn't quite work for me, so I thought we'll switch out Lipard, we'll bring in Misty, and because they both have special defense raises, that wasn't doing too much either. I swapped the supports over, and that didn't quite do it either. The major breakthrough came when I realised that Gengar has inertia, and you really need that Snatch in there to try and survive that. So evasiveness continues to absolutely frustrate me out of my mind. Both Misty and Grimsley can boost their evasiveness, and it's like sometimes it works, other times you'll get hit by like 5 attacks in a row and Gengar's just, he's like all hits all the time, and then I'll let off a Snarl that's supposed to hit all of them and Gengar's like whoop, miss me, whoop, miss me, and it's like, but you have no evasiveness here, I've got max evasiveness, how is this? The good news is that Gengar's sync move doesn't hit particularly hard. All of your units should be able to survive it with a fair amount of health remaining. You can also use Lipard's Snatch just before the sync move to reduce any stats that it may have raised, and that's going to mitigate the damage even further. The first move that Agatha is going to use after her sync move is Run Along Now. That's going to raise Gengar's speed move to the maximum. You're going to want to use Snatch after that, definitely, because Gengar also has inertia, which means that the more its speed has been raised, the more damage its sync moves do, and if you come against another sync move where it's got that 6 boost, it's going to wipe you out. I was tending to use Snarl with Karen over Dark Pulse. The reason for that is twofold. Firstly, Snarl will reduce the special attack of all of the opposing sync pairs. The second reason is that move bar usage can be a bit of an issue. So if you're using a 3-bar move with Karen and then a 2-bar move because you're trying to do some healing with Misty, and then another 2-bar move with Grimsley, even if it has raised its speed to 6, you're not necessarily going to get all of the bars to do that. Whereas if you're using Snarl, you've got a much better chance of using a 2, and a 2. So you've got Misty in there to do her own healing and maybe heal one of the others if she gets some move point refreshes for Catch Us If You Can. She's going to be raising special defense as well. Hopefully you'll have a bit of good luck with your evasiveness, and if you do, you should be able to do this one reasonably easily. If you don't, then Shadow Ball is just going to come along and wipe you out, and there's nothing you can do about it. Of course, sometimes you get all the evasiveness in the world, and you go in with a last Dark Pulse thinking this is going to do it, and it leaves Gengar with just the tiniest little bit of health left, and it does you in. See how little health it has there. See how irritating that is. On to round 3, and your condition this time is that any field effects that come into play are permanent. So given that Lorelei was weak to grass, I thought I would go in with a grassy, sunny team. And that grassy, sunny team was Meganium, Vileplume and Erica, who I've not used before, and Brendan and Sceptile. And the thinking was that Meganium uses the sync move to set Sun. That gives everyone a healing Sun, and it also gives at least 2 of them a speeding Sun as well, depending on how you've gridded them. I went for mostly strength parameters again. I wasn't going to be using status conditions, so no status conditions in there. So first of all, you use no holding back with Brendan to raise both his attack and his special attack. You've got plenty of trainer moves to use with Vileplume to raise its defense and make it a bit more tanky in there. Hopefully you'll get some move point refreshes as well. With Meganium, you want to try and set Light Screen at some point, because that's also going to become permanent. You can raise everyone's crit hit rate. You could maybe use Sunny Side Up, but that's more effective if you use it after the sync move. As I said before, Meganium uses the sync move first, because that's going to set some glorious sunshine, and then after that it's the Brendan show and he's using Leaf Storm. Meganium can also have a sync grid node called Hit and Heal, so this means if it takes a certain attack, I'm not sure entirely what the conditions are, it's going to induce it to start healing itself, and then it gets additional from Healing Sun as well, so that's very useful. The first time I did it, I was getting a bit low on health, and then that suddenly kicked in. I was able to start using energy balls and getting that double healing each round and raised it back up again. So some troubles that you might run into. Both of the sides, one of them has Icy Wind, the other one has Blizzard. They're both going to hit you quite hard, so you could consider taking out the sides first and then hitting Lapras in the middle. After Lapras uses its sync move, which isn't hopefully going to hit you too hard, it also gets self-healing, unfortunately. But if you've got a good Brendan and you've given it Dauntless, as I have, so its special attack never gets reduced, then that Leaf Storm is gonna far outstrip with its damage any healing that Lapras is doing to itself. In round 4 I was left with Lance, and your condition is a physical attack boost. Initially, because I saw Lance was weak to fairy types, I thought, well, this is going to be great for me. I'm going to be using Xerneas, and that he's going to be using Horn Leech, and we're just going to Horn Leech and heal, and Horn Leech and heal, and nothing's going to get in our way. And then Gramble would be in there using Charm to reduce the attack of all of the enemies. Very useful move to have, by the way. And then I added Lycanroc in there as a bit of a sync nuker, just in case I needed it. And so I started off with a strength-based list of parameters. In the end I went more to a sort of sync stall with Lycanroc, because Lance hits you hard. He's got Giga Impact and Double Edge, both of which are very powerful moves. I always hate it when the enemy has Double Edge, because the recoil it does is next to nothing. And it's like, they've got a huge pool of health, so of course any recoil it's like, there's a little speck on my shoulder from that. Anyway, let's do it again. And that's not really the point of having a move like that. And of course what I didn't realise is that all of Lance's moves are physical attack moves. So I've given myself a little bit of a bonus, but I've given him a huge bonus with the condition that I've chosen there. So maybe in future, if I was doing it again, I'd swap Agatha and Lance around. But the tactic here is do everything you can to help Xerneas tank and keep itself upright. Xerneas sinks first. Gramble uses Charm to reduce the attack of all of the enemy sync pairs, and then Lycanroc is sort of a sync nuker. If you see that Xerneas is getting quite low on health, you could maybe do another Xerneas sync to try and boost its health back up, but you've got to balance that against actually doing the damage to the enemies, because it's going to be Lycanroc that does the most amount of damage. This one did take me quite a few attempts to do, so if Lance is using Dragon Claw, that's going to do like just a little bit of damage to you. It's when it starts getting on a roll of using Double Edge and Giga Impact. That's when you want to start worrying. So sometimes it gets on a roll of using Dragon Claw, and instead of using Horn Leech, you can get in there and you can use a Moon Blast to do that bit more damage. But if it does start using Double Edge, then unfortunately Xerneas is not long for this world, because it can tank, but it can't tank that much. My advice would be you don't need to use The World is Vast right away, because Xerneas is going to get some health back from using its sync move. The other pairs aren't going to have taken any damage yet, so they don't necessarily need the healing. If you're struggling for move bars, you can use What Great Composition with Mina. The enemy doesn't really buff themselves that much. The main ones they do are a little bit of speed and a little bit of accuracy. So it's not like you have to wait long into the battle and it's like, ooh, suddenly their stats are really high and I want those stats as well. It's like, I'll take them when I get them. But if the odds are in your favour, you should be able to unleash some big sync moves and take down that Dragonite. And lastly, we have the champion round against Blue with his Alakazam this week. The condition that you get is status moves are more effective. The optional condition I chose was a physical attack reduction. None of the other ones really seemed to appeal to me there. This one I found quite difficult because I saw that he was weak to Bug and I thought, well, that means Viola and Masquerain and then maybe Koga. But I also already used Misty, who's like the third part of that trio. So I tried to use Lucy in there as my main poison type. Then she's weak to Psychic, and then it's like, well, if I'm using Lucy, do I really need Masquerain in there as well? And I was going to try and use Nidoqueen from an egg, but it wasn't tanky or healy enough, so it just wasn't working out for me. So eventually the team I ended up taking in was Koga, Janine and Jasmine. And the conditions I've put in are all sort of the standard poison stall parameters that you would put in there. Even with that, this wasn't just a case of, right, you do your poison, you do your venom drench, you sit back and you think, yeah, come on Alakazam, you aren't going to take me down. Because even with the parameters that you put in place and with the venom drench at full effects, Alakazam can still hit really hard. Its special attacks are no joke. And that's why Jasmine in there, she's quite tanky, and then she's using her sync move, which gives her a bit of health back each time. This is the first time that I've gone like hard on a poison stall strategy, and it's not been, reasonably effortless. I really had to be on my game and look at the parameters I was using quite carefully and think about my tactics to get through this one. And it took me a few attempts to get through. The major damage here is just before Alakazam's sync move. It's going to use telekinesis, so you can't dodge the attack. Then it's going to use its sync move, and then it's going to use a focus blast on you. And you need a unit in there that's capable of withstanding all of that damage that's going to come its way. I originally had Masquerain set as my first target, and even with its own healing, it really couldn't withstand all of the damage that was coming its way. And even if it did survive, it was that low on health that it was just like, oh, this is going to be such a slog. So a better composition might have had Venusaur in there instead of Koga to get that mass poisoning with a Razor Leaf, and then mega healing as well, and then its potions on top of that. I'm always a bit reluctant to use the likes of Venusaur and Charizard and Leon when I'm making these videos, because it's like, well, yeah, just use these super units that aren't available to everyone and only have been available for a short time, because that doesn't make for very interesting content. If I was just doing that, I could be like, right, okay, use Charizard in this round, use Venusaur in this round, use this guy in this round, and you'll breeze through it. But that's not helpful if you don't have those units available to you. But here, Venusaur would have been quite useful because it's a difficult round. It's not an easy one. It's not an easy poison stall to be running. The alternative is you could put together a team focused around Bug Striker. I don't really have one that's absolute top notch, like I have Levanium Burr and I have Guzma and Scoliopede, but I don't necessarily trust them in a Champion Stadium environment to be able to put out the damage, and that's why I went with more of a poison stall. If you've got Alder in there, then you probably stand a better chance of doing it with a Bug Striker in there. And there we are, that's another 7,500 point run for the Champion Stadium Master Mode. Hopefully you're joining me on the podium and you've got a nice Hall of Fame team in there as well. So we've got a rerunning of Azelf in the Legendary Arena. I've already got the medals and such from the first run through, so I can't remember what team I was using there. Probably Charizard. That was what I did when I was just doing it for myself. But that doesn't make for very interesting content. And this time there are a few new missions focused around themes. So you've got a Unova theme, you've got a Gym Leader theme, and you've got a Bug theme. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do all three of those in one run. You could. And if you did, please let me know how you did it, because I would be very, very interested. So I split it into Unova and Gym Leaders, and then I did Bug separately. So to cover off Unova, I chose a theme of Hilbert, Skylar with Swanna, and Elisa with Zebstreaker. So this is good because both of your supports, your Hilbert and your Skylar, they can raise speed. I have Zebstreaker gridded to use inertia, so higher speed, more power on the sync move. Hilbert can also boost attack and crit hit rate if you've got him gridded to do so, and that's very helpful when you're trying to get crit hits in there. Skylar's in there for healing. She sinks first because she's 6x, and then after that you're hitting with Spark, so maybe try and cause paralysis. It's not like Thunderous, it doesn't have a special effect to it, it's just useful to have because maybe it's going to skip a move. And then the big Sync Nuke to try and do as much damage as possible. I panicked towards the end of the second bar because Skylar had just fainted. I could see that it had a Sync move coming up, so I queued up Waterfall and then Wild Charge. The Waterfall actually made it flinch, so I wouldn't have necessarily needed it. But the Wild Charge, it took it to the end of the bar and onto the third one. It also did a lot of recoil damage to me. I need to see if there's a way where I can still keep the kind of Sync Nuker thing, but also mitigate the damage caused by Wild Charge. And so as soon as the bar resets, Azelf uses Swift. Hilbert was already on 1 health. Alyssa didn't have much more and it made me faint. So the second team I chose was Blue and Pidgeot. Rotom, as I've talked about, that's a good combination, those two. I also took in Leaf and Venusaur. I was hoping to get some poison in there, but before I could really do anything with Leaf, I don't think I'd even used Mega Healing yet. She fainted to a critical hit, so it was kind of just those two out there on their own. Blue and Elisa against the world. Maybe they'll fall in love. And I made a couple of errors on this one. I badly mistimed a sync move, which would have taken out Azelf. But it kind of worked out in my favour because I was able to take one more team in against Azelf, who only had 14% health left. And that meant that I could get the Gym Leader badge as well by taking in a team of Misty, Barry and Xerneas. So I didn't faff about with trying to get Xerneas to sync first, it was just power up and unleash the Barry Bomb. And that worked. So as I mentioned before, I don't really have a very strong bug type striker. I've got a couple. I also don't have any bug type supports. So I've got like 4 strikers and 1 tech. And you can't really run a team around that one. So in the end, what I ended up doing was using a bug team as my first 3, just to get it out of the way, and however much damage, that was a bonus, and I was going to try and do the rest of it with 2 teams. So I went in with Noland and Pinsir, Viola and Masquerain, and Levani and Burr. And the idea was Pinsir is your first target because he's got a trainer move that can bring back its health. Viola second, she has her own self-healing and she does trap and she can reduce stats. And then Burr is your main damage dealer. And that did alright. It did sort of maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the first bar. And then I reverted back to my Unova team. So Zebstrika, Hilbert and Skylar. And because I've been through it already, I kind of had a bit more of a feel for what I was doing. I didn't panic and use a big wild charge when I didn't need to. And that took me comfortably into its 3rd bar of health. Unfortunately, Skylar got burned at one point, which meant that I wasn't really attacking with her. That's what I tend to do. If my first target gets burned, it's like, I'll just leave it there to tank. It's not going to attack. That means that the sync move countdown doesn't move as fast. So if that hadn't happened, potentially I could have done it with just 6 pairs. But that wasn't how it worked out. And then my 3rd team was Blue, Rotom and Misty. I really needed everything out of these 3. I needed the evasiveness, I needed the healing hands with Misty, I needed breathtaking, and I had a small amount of health left with Blue, and I just managed to get that last hurricane in there to take out Azelf, and that was the bug medal all done for me. So our time trial events are still going. It is the last few days of those. If you're in a comfortable position like me, you've already got to the 90,000 point mark to get the last golden ticket as a reward. I'd remind you that you get completion bonuses for doing the other 2. So take one of your goes each day and do those at least once each so that you get the completion bonus for those. Once you've done that, you can go back to using all of your daily goes on the part 3. We're also on to the last few days of the Dragon That Rules the Sky with Rayquaza and Zinnia. So make sure you get in there and you finish off that event. You don't want to be leaving any of your rewards still there and thinking, if only someone had warned me. Why? So get that done before the 18th. The Father or Foe event is still ongoing. I think that's next week that ends. So you've still got some time to earn the rewards from that. And they are good rewards. There's plenty of gold tickets in there. You've got move coins for both Strike and Tech in there. So that's all good. And even discounting the big prize from each box, you can stock up on materials for cap unlocks. So because of that, I've managed to unlock a couple of more for 135 and knocked out a few for the 130 cap. What I've been doing is I've put Getsis in my main team that I've saved for that, getting the EXP for that to raise him up without having to use any of my training manuals. I'll probably have to use a few when it gets to really high levels, but for now, just soaking up that sweet, sweet free XP. So as I said, Father or Foe, pretty good event. And finally, the new event this week is Splash and Punch. It's introducing a few more Galarian pairs, and all of the bonus pairs in this event are from the Galar region. I quite like that, for example, Rayhan is included with the boosts there, because I've played some other games where you get a special unit for one event and then it's forgotten about after that, and it's useless after that event is over. So I quite like that. I know people have been complaining that there's not many pairs that get the boost, and they are all from Galar and they've all been banner fairs. So, you know, I looked at it and was like, oh, okay, I like that. It's just a shame that I don't have any of the bonus pairs. I've not had time to go through the full force battle for it yet, so that will be included in the next video I do. And that was the week that was on Pokemon Masters for this running of Kanto Week 2. I'm not sure if there'll be a video next week. I've got a couple of things going on the days that I usually record and edit, so it might be that there's not a video at all, or if there is, it's a very short kind of Cliff's Notes version of it. But hopefully I'll see you for the week that will be next week. You've made it past the 90-second mark at this point, so congratulations. Hopefully you've connected with something within this video, deep inside your soul. And if you want to make another deep soul connection, then check out some of the other videos on the channel. I'm sure there's something in there that you'll like. There's over 500 of them at this point. But thank you very much for watching this video, and goodbye.